And welcome to this week's forum. I am here with Robert Dunlap. He's a local attorney, and he's also on the Beckley Human Rights Commission. And right now, you guys just passed a really important ordinance just earlier this week. So tell me a little about that.
Oh, absolutely. And you know, I wish I could completely agree with that summary. A lot of folks think that something with finality occurred, but in fact, the Human Rights Commission met and we decided on a proposal to make to City Council. And hopefully this coming Tuesday, they'll take that issue up and they'll elect to make the changes that the Human Rights Commission has proposed. Now, those changes are important because essentially, if you're in housing or if you're in employment, it'll allow some additional protections for a person of the LGBT community. Now, it's funny because the first thing that people hear and react to me in that moment when I say that, they think, well, those protections already exist. Those are federal protections, and what you folks are doing is superfluous. What you're doing is without merit. And there are some folks that even take it so far as to think that their civil liberties are being trampled. But here's the big thing to make sure folks know. This is City of Beckley. It's not Raleigh County. It's not the tri-state area. It's just Beckley city limits. So if you're housed in Beckley, or if you're working in Beckley, your employer wouldn't be able to Facebook find out that you got married on Saturday, and then fire you on Monday. They wouldn't be able to find out that you and your life partner are married, and now you've crossed some line in my opinion, and now you're going to be evicted. You shouldn't ever be discriminated against for the color of your skin, for your faith. Being Christian shouldn't be something that allows you to be fired from your employment. Similarly, who you choose to love, something as immutable as and not selectable as sexual orientation should not be justification for firing, hiring. I mean, it's ultimately, it's one of those things where people think these protections exist, but they don't. We want Beckley to join the 11 other cities in West Virginia that have seen this need, want to make ourselves competitive in this market, this job market, because that's what it's about. It's about making people feel welcome. It's about making people understand that this community is accepting, and just putting that out there, that we have an inclusive, caring community. Come to Beckley, quit leaving. I mean, everyone goes through their Rolodex. I'm dating myself. Everyone goes through their contact list, and what do they see? People, young people, leaving this area, going to bigger cities, and we sell ourselves this crap bill of goods that they went there because there are more opportunities. They went there, they wanted a bigger city life. They wanted to be away from their families. The reality is, for a lot of these folks, is they wanted to go where they could raise their children without bigotry, without those types of preconceived notions being instilled in their children through a community. And Beckley has one heck of an opportunity here to step up, make it self-inclusive, make it self-caring, get with the times. Obviously, a large catalyst for this was West Virginia Tech. And private companies, like the company I run, my law firm has these policies in place where we absolutely would never discriminate for all of the protected classes, as well as gender identity, as well as sexual orientation. And other companies have included those, Panera Bread. These different companies have included that type of language in their policies and procedures. But a lot of entities don't. So, if inside of city limits, our local government makes the affirmative passage of this legislation and says, come to the Human Rights Commission if you have this type of a grievance. If someone has called you a slur that relates to sexual orientation, bring that to us. Let us try to resolve those issues. I think it speaks volumes for Beckley's moving in the right direction.
All right, my next question is, it's 2018. Why do you think it has just taken so long?
Well, I'm glad you asked. 4 years ago, we had a different administration. We had only one person that's currently on our Human Rights Commission that was on there now, is on there currently now. We have a different commission. We have a different mayor. We have different council persons. 4 years ago, what was tried was, let's pitch this ordinance change, and it died. And when it died, I know because I had a front row seat for that. City Council this Tuesday will open its doors, and provided this is on the agenda, on Tuesday, they're going to read our proposed changes to the ordinance, and they're going to vote. What happened 4 years ago that was so alarming was that council opens up at 6:30. There were folks, including congregates that belonged to a church that I was going to at the time, that showed up hours early and completely blocked entrance into city council. Now, I don't blame my fellow Christian parishioners. I don't. There was, and I like to call them a hate group, but there's an entity called Family Policy Council that fed a lot of local churches, including the church I was attending, a lot of misinformation. Stuff like, in the event that this ordinance passes, you will have to hire a gay to be your organist in your church, or you will have to, you won't have in your church, your pastor will no longer be able to preach this way. Recognizing that the ordinance already had carve-outs for religious organizations, there was already protections there that those persons, based on their affiliation with a religious organization, would not be hamstrung into this ordinance. And frankly, it doesn't matter what your religious belief is. Treating everyone equally with fairness, it should be the default. It is, in fact, the golden rule. It is what Judeo-Christian beliefs start on, treating others the way you want to be treated. But 4 years ago, a packed room, and one little brave lady named Gail Kinsey made it inside, and she spoke for the passage of this ordinance. And Gail, a little over 5 foot, this tall, courageous mountain of a woman, goes in against this huge church opposition and fights the misinformation and explains why this ordinance was important. And it was unfortunate. The city council voted and killed the proposition 4 years ago. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people just thought it was dead. I can't tell you that that entity specifically, has not already started mobilizing itself, giving this bad information to the churches. But what I've encouraged everyone to do is simply read the ordinance. I'll provide a copy to you. I'm more than happy to see WVVA place it on their website. I've asked the Register Herald if they would consider running the proposed changes in the paper. Mm-hmm. It's really going to be important for people to see that that's not what's being pushed.
Yeah. All right, well, let me go ahead and interject. I know that there are some cities in West Virginia that they've already have these laws passed. So do you know what's the reception there? Are people, are they fine with it overall since it's been passed, if you know that information?
Well, I do. If you look at Morgantown, if you look at Charleston, mm-hmm. these other cities that already have the ordinance in place, they've noticed that dramatically, if nothing other than a catalyst for business, mm-hmm. it has encouraged businesses to move into their cities. It's encouraged people to stay. No one has reported that this ordinance has restricted religious freedoms, okay. that this ordinance has in some way created these negative impacts that have been proposed that they have.
Oh, all right. What? I'm just trying to, why do you think are people just not open? They're not open to these things? Are they just, not with the modern times? What do you think the main thing is with the community and why they're just kind of not jumping on the bandwagon?
Well, there's a lot of different things, that are afoot. Mm-hmm. One is a large chunk of us think that these protections are in place, but they're not. LGBT status has never been a protected class on a federal level. Mm-hmm. You've heard that we don't discriminate against federal employees. Mm-hmm. They have protections, but John Public, who works at the local mom and pop shop in Beckley, he doesn't have these protections. So there's folks that think that they're already there. You have some folks that think these are special rights. Mm-hmm. These are giving someone else more than what I have. And there's this whole culture in West Virginia right now where people seem to think that if other folks are getting rights, that it's taking something away from them. Okay, well, you're getting this, that means I must be getting less. You're getting some sort of a governmental benefit. You're getting food stamps. We need to stop that. I'm not getting that. of course, they're usually the first persons to rush out and make sure that they're getting Social Security benefits whenever it's time for them to receive that, or they ask for unemployment if they lose their position. The reality is the whole premise of the Judeo-Christian faith is that we're going to help others. We're going to feed our poor. We're going to take care of our infirmed. This is an extent of that. The folks here's the third group of folks, the folks that say, this discrimination doesn't happen. There aren't lawsuits where people are being fired because they're LGBT. There aren't folks who are being evicted. And I can tell you, in working with Marie Bechtel at Legal Aid, in working my own practice, I see folks come in and say, there was no reason for me to be fired until the extremely religious owner decided that this was now an issue. My relationship, my girlfriend, my boyfriend, they never had a problem with me. I worked fine. I've been here for 8 years. And it's hard. And it's hard because ultimately that group is the hardest to convince, because if they don't see it, now granted, those folks are all willing to tune in and watch Will and Grace, or let their gay hairstylist fluff their hair, make their window treatments. Oh, well, that's perfectly fine. But we don't want to hear about those people not being treated fairly, because one of our people might be the ones not treating them fairly. There's lots of different causes for people to not see the importance of these ordinances. But we need to educate folks on the reality of what those individuals go through, and then walk the mile in their shoes.
All right, now as far as WVU Tech, it's right there. It's right there in the center of Beckley. What kind of, have you all been out there talking to the students, making sure that they're gonna, voice their opinions? Hey, call the mayor, let him know that you should be voting to approve this. Have you guys did anything like that?
We don't need to. Let me tell you, we had our Human Rights Commission meeting, and there were 40 kids, students, showing up of every ethnicity, every religious background, saying, this is common sense. Now, whenever I tuned into a radio program from Alan Witt, he reduced the mentality of our local colleges to a little socialist factory producing these little socialist people that they're all ultra liberal and they don't think for themselves, and they're trying to infringe on your free speech abilities to hire and fire and evict and whatever, and that's wrong and blah blah blah. This next generation is going to look at us like dinosaurs if we cannot protect the 10%, if not more, of the population that's LGBT. And frankly, it's an obligation. It's an obligation that we have, especially folks that look like me, to make sure that we aren't engaging in discrimination. We're not complicit in discrimination. There's a history of people that look like me that have discriminated against other groups for millennia, and it's time to stop. If folks who can, speak up when they see women being sexually harassed, when they see people being passed over promotions that have a different ethnicity, if we don't start using our voices, then we're absolutely no better than the people who hurl racial epithets, get their buddies together to go drink, to go beat up on the slightly built young man who may or may not be gay. I mean, somehow folks think that because they don't throw out that word or throw out, and I know it's going to be aired on TV, so I don't like to use all the epithets that they throw out for homosexuals, but we think because we're not using those words, somehow we're better. If you don't stop that person who, even if they don't use those words, but acts out of that hatred from being able to continue that, you're part of the problem.
All right. Now, local businesses in the area, have you all tried to talk to them just to kind of see, let's just see what they're feeling right now versus 4 years ago?
Well, I'm also on the board for the Downtown Beckley Business Association, although we missed a meeting to tape this evening. And I'm also Rotarian. I've talked to a lot of folks. And started from a place of correcting the misinformation that's promulgated by those lobbyist organizations, and that's what they are. They get huge amounts of money, and they go to Charleston. And I encourage people to Google them, because there's a great radio program that one recently did. Alan Witt did one that said, the mayor of Beckley folded like a cheap suit. He told us that he didn't originally think that this ordinance would be necessary, and now he's changing his mind under text pressure. And we will be running a different candidate. We will be the ones that select who are going to be Beckley's mayors and council people. He's from Huntington. and throwing an Oscar party as a professing heterosexual man. I mean, at the end of the day, those folks aren't going to pick our politicians. We're going to pick our politicians. And I hope we pick our politicians based on inclusivity, on creating jobs, seeing that Beckley has real problems with crime and drug addiction, and yes, with discrimination, that we can make better. And what we don't need is someone with a statewide agenda that thinks that stepping back into the 1950s is going to bring Beckley into the future.
All right, so we're going to take a quick commercial break, but don't worry, me and him, we're going to go back, and we still got a lot more to talk about, all right?
Absolutely.
All right, we'll see you in just a bit. And welcome back, everyone. Once again, Robert Dunlap. All right, so let's go ahead, jump right back into it. Do you think West Virginia is just such a religious state that people, they don't approve of this?
Well, it's tough. It's tough because there's a lot of Old Testament ideologies that people seem stuck on. I tell folks, at the end of the day, what you do in your restroom, what you do in your bedroom needs to be the least interesting thing about you. And frankly, it's a privacy issue. I mean, that part of me that wants to tell people that they should mind their own business always wants to come out. But and no one wants someone looking through their browser history or looking into what their sins are. They just want to throw stones at other folks. The fact that they might be divorced, the fact that they're not wearing a dress that's ankle length, or that they are engaging in something with someone unclean during certain times. There's lots of scripture that they don't really want to address, but let's talk about that one thing in Leviticus. At the end of the day, I don't think West Virginians are backward. I don't think it's about that at all. I think something happened within the 4 years from when the ordinance didn't pass last time and now. That kind of was a game changer. Marriage equality went through, and on a national level, it was acceptable to marry whoever you wanted. And West Virginia, as a state, is not ready for that premise. I've been ordained as a minister, and I've married my aunts. And it was a very proud day because they'd been committed for over 20 years before they could legally walk down an aisle in West Virginia, and they did. And it was beautiful, and Cindy and Rosemary's commitment is a gorgeous thing. But that being said, West Virginia as a whole wasn't really prepared for that. They felt like that liberal agenda thing was jammed down their throats. It's the law. It's not going back. You know, you can't undo that one. It is now a civil liberty recognized, and it is what it is. So they make it sound like the opposition, you're just trying to get more rights. You're just trying to take more rights from us and give more rights to these folks, and it's not the case. There is a strong opposition in the heart of some folks to discriminate against others. And until we change that inside of people, until they see that whether you believe in someone's personal choices, their lifestyle, what have you, that has nothing to do with the fact that you're supposed to love them as your fellow West Virginian. You're supposed to love and care for those people, make sure that their needs are being met. That is the premise that we're all supposed to function over, to love thy neighbors.
All right. Now, as a lawyer, you kind of mentioned, you've already heard the stories of people being discriminated against.
Absolutely.
I want to tell me some of those stories.
Well, one driving force for me in this was that I met a person who was a great teacher, had the calling to become a principal. And as a principal, local churches band together and went to that Board of Education, and that principal was fired summarily. Went back to teaching for a little while, and then luckily found another school that moved him into a principal role. Has been there now for decades, and is quite possibly the best principal we've had in this region, period. But know that in the 90s, in the early 90s, appointed to this school, a group of loud parents had the power to end that person's career, to walk in that Board of Education and say, here's what we think about this person's personal choices, their personal life, and they cannot teach my kid, and it worked. There's something inherently wrong about me looking at you and saying, I don't like you're Muslim. I don't like that you're over 40. I don't like you're a woman. I don't like that you love that person that shares your gender, and therefore you can't live here. You can't work here. There's something really wrong about covering for anybody that has that kind of hatred in your heart. But what's even worse is when you pretend that that hatred comes from a place of Christian love. Nowhere in my Bible does it say to judge others, and nowhere in my Bible does it say that I am the one that decides who lives next to me. I decide who works with me based on what their propensity to commit a sin is. That's nowhere in the book. But people pick and choose the doctrine that they want to support, and that's really what we have to get past. My Constitution reminds me about separation of church and state. You never hear me at one of these commission meetings talking about my faith as a Christian, because it has no place there. It doesn't. What we do there is we take care of folks through government. What I feel in my heart, what my faith tells me, can't be where I legislate from. We have separated those two. It is as fundamental as the right to bear arms in this country, but people forget that all too often.
All right, right now, I want you to look into the camera. Okay, there we go, get you a little sip of water. If somebody's watching right now and they are just not sold for this.
Sure.
What is, let's say, 2 sentences, or you can take it however long you want.
Sure.
What is something that you would say to them right now to get them to kind of jump on board?
It's the same thing I would tell people if you saw this terrible thing come across your TV during an election year. Vote for this person because this, vote for this person because they're going to do this for you. Set all that garbage aside and do a little independent research for yourself. Before you buy into some logic that this is going to hurt business, look and see how these 11 cities that have passed this over the last 2 years have done, because it hasn't hurt their economy. Also, read the ordinance and see that for the most part, 3 words have been changed: gender expression, sexual orientation. Most folks already thought that those protections existed. They don't exist. They don't exist, and they don't exist in Beckley. The state legislature had an opportunity to take this up and didn't. And they won't because, again, there's political action groups that are receiving massive amounts of funds to make sure that their agenda and their self-fulfilling existence is perpetuated by fueling this hate. So read the ordinance, see that it changes 3 words in like 11 places, and know you're not being bamboozled. I mean, it's as simple as protecting the rights of others does not diminish rights of your own. It's just that simple.
All right, now in that you said some people, they feel like the economy might change.
Oh, sure.
Charleston, Lewisburg, those are 2 cities in West Virginia that actually approved this. Has their economy been affected negatively in any way?
No. And if you think of it, I studied law in Pittsburgh. Amazon almost went there. And they sent out bids and they were encouraging people to come in and encouraging different companies to, different cities to pitch themselves. If you want Amazon to come here, you city, sell us why we should come to you. Well, inclusivity, having laws to protect all your people's religious and personal freedoms, you better believe Pittsburgh understood that that was important to attract that type of a business. We used it to attract tech away from Fayette County because we said, hey, tech, we more closely mirror a liberal arts college because we care about our people and we're not some small city that doesn't have a more liberal and progressive populace. That was a selling point. Tech bought it. So fulfill your promises, Beckley, and don't let that young man who walks down the street that came to me yesterday that was called that horrible epithet be called that and treated differently by 2 locals walking down the street. Send a large message that if you're hired by this company, they're not just simply going to fire you because you're a gay person. I mean, it's amazing in 2018 I even have to say those words because who cares? Are we not past that? But look at who shows up Tuesday, and we'll find out if we are past that.
All right, so let's go ahead. Let's fast forward Tuesday. What if this does not pass? What's next?
Well, in the event that on Tuesday, whenever the council meets, if the mayor is not able to convince the two outstanding, and frankly, all of the folks that show up, if we're not able to convince these two last council persons that are either on the fence or against this, that this is what's right for Beckley, I mean, it's a blow. It's a blow. And if I'm tech, I have to think, my kids aren't really feeling welcome here. And they get it. The students understand what this means. So, you know, it's an unfulfilled promise. It's an unfulfilled promise that we've implicitly made by bringing this college here. And we've already been reaping the benefits of them being here. I mean, Top Knot Coffee Shop, which is great, Tickety Boo. We have Roma's Pizza. We have businesses that are thriving because tech has moved here. Guess what? We're going to have to do some work. And it's more than just putting up crosswalks at red lights. We're going to have to do things so that these kids feel welcome in housing and in employment.
All right. So is there anything else that you want? I know there's some couple things that you did want to add. Anything else?
Well, realistically, I just hope that people, before they decide to show up and they think that this is an attack on their religious freedom, I hope they read the ordinance. They call one of their commissioners. And realistically, if you don't live or work in the city of Beckley, if you're some angry person typing into the internet from Coal City or from one of these surrounding areas, this isn't about you. You discriminate against whoever you want out there. But in Beckley, we are going to make sure that the people that come in our town to live and to work are protected and cared for, because we need that business here. We want that business here. And I'm tired of our biggest export not being coal, but young intellectual capital.
All right. So now people, they're moving away. Do you think if this passed, will people move back to Beckley?
Well, think of it like this. They call it Silicon Holler, where you have that Fairmont area where all the tech companies went. You know, at the end of the day, we're talking about smart, intellectual people. We want to attract them. If they're comparing us with another city that is going to protect them, if they feel very strongly about inclusivity, they have an Aunt Cindy like I do, that they don't ever want to be taught by the people in their community that she should be vilified. Do you go to a neighborhood, do you go to a community where you don't have to worry about what these kids are being indoctrinated with? Or do you want to go to some place where, hey, maybe my religious says that you shouldn't eat pork, maybe my religion says you shouldn't do this or that, but I'm not going to fire you for it. I'm not going to judge you for it. I'm going to respect this about you. And I think that is going to be something that draws people to Southern West Virginia.
All right. Well, thank you so much for that.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. Now, one last thing. To those two councilmen, what would you say to them right now?
Well, our two council persons that are still outstanding, they have to listen to their constituents. They have to listen to but more importantly, they need to listen Tuesday to what I hope will be a fair and civil debate. I mean, at the end of the day, if you have folks that care about this for legitimate reasons, listen to them. If you have folks that think this will be harmful to Beckley, listen to them. But vote your conscience and hopefully just do the right thing.
All right. Well, thanks so much for that, Robert Dunlap, on this week's edition of Forum. And of course, Newswatch, we're going to continue to update you on whether this ordinance passes or not. Thank you.